And welcome to another edition on this journey of I've Decided to Live 120 Years. We appreciate everyone in our audience who's been taking this trip with us, and we've been having a chance to meet so many fascinating people on this walk that we're taking. People who are helping us to understand so many of the fundamental and wonderful issues that Il-Chi Lee has brought forth in his book, I've Decided to Live 120 Years. Today, we have a really exciting opportunity to meet someone who's actually a good friend of mine. Her name is Julia, and Julia Vimal is a terrific person who has been on this quest for quite a while. And together, she and I are going to explore this idea of I feel trapped by obligations, possessions, and daily life. How can I let go and find peace? This is a question that so many of the people in our audience have asked us to talk about. And so we're really, really glad to have a chance to do it. Let me give you a sense of who Julia is. Julia is a very seasoned healthcare executive working in the largest healthcare companies in America, where she focuses on how to advance technology, artificial intelligence, and processes that allow people to use technology to change their industries and make a real difference in life. So you can imagine that Julia is a person who works under very high pressure, and she's got a lot of responsibilities, and yet still she finds the way to be thinking carefully about the issue that we're talking about today. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thank you, Reed. I'm excited to be here. I'm delighted to be here. I'm honored and humbled at the same time. And I'm looking forward to discussing this really important topic, very dear to me throughout my entire career and my life. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And let's start by just understanding a little bit about you. Where were you raised?
So I would probably consider myself a poster child of American dream, if you will. I grew up in Eastern Europe in a country called Belarus, Belarusia, and it's actually bordering with Poland, Ukraine, and Russia. And at age of 14, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother-in-law, my little niece, and my grandma ventured on the quest to U.S. So I'm excited. I've lived here for about 27 years now. I'm excited to live in U.S. and, of course, living what, we would call an American dream,
Wow.
So I'm excited to share my journey.
So you and your family are risk takers. You're people who have decided for whatever reason that you could let things go literally and go across the world and find a new life. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually exciting because none of us spoke English. I was 14, my grandma was 67, my sister was and my brother-in-law was in their 20s, and my little niece was 2 months old. And my parents, who were about my age in their early 40s, just pretty much dropped everything, sold everything they had. And for 7 of us, we had, just a great sum of money of $2,000, buying tickets, packing our bags, and venturing and settling here in Minnesota. So you are correct. We did, in fact, let everything go.
Wow.
And my parents, of course, I thank them for it every single day.
This is very similar to a story that Il-Chi talks about in his book, I've Decided to Live 120 Years, where he comes to America with very little money, and the little money he had was stolen almost immediately as soon as he got here. And so he talks about how do you sort of overcome that. And I think that's really a lesson for all of us to have, not only the lesson of courage to take risks, but sometimes even when things don't go well, we find a way to endure. Have you sort of seen similar things in your journey as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, actually, I'm Jewish. So part of our journey to U.S. Was the fallout of United country, which used to be called USSR. And essentially, my family feared for security of us when all of what's called pogroms were very real risk. And so my parents really didn't have a choice. They wanted to save and preserve peace and safety and opportunity for all of us. And like I said, we didn't really have much to start with our journey, but my parents, just their unconditional love for us And for us as children, obviously, and them taking the chance and leading all of us on that journey was just humbling experience for me.
That's
So
great. That's
absolutely.
just great to find some people with got courage and determination and all of these attributes that are part of your life. Tell me about how you came to start to expand on your Jewish religion and your training there, and adding other elements as you explored your spirituality. How did you sort of find your way to where you are now?
Yeah, this is a great topic. So realistically, of course, living under communism regime back in my country, the religion was not something we can practice openly. However, funny enough, there were certainly a lot of a risk and anti-Semitism that was very present, kind of an undercurrent, and it was very noticeable. Where my mom having really amazing grades, she couldn't get into the colleges she wanted, and my grandpa, who was very much a World War II veteran, very decorated veteran, couldn't get promoted in ranks in the Army, right? Pilot with a lot of experience. So things like that were happening to us kind of on a daily basis. And I remember growing up fearing even disclosing my religion to my new friends, feeling that, in some shape or form, I was kind of second best, and my parents would always tell me, as Jewish, you've got to work 10 times harder, and there will be a lot of suffering. So naturally, I always felt this feeling of being not enough, right? Feeling of not enough, and always feeling of sort of how can religion be so, not liberating? How can religion be so suffocating in some way? But yet I was proud for who I was, and every day, this is who I am. But it was hard. It was really hard growing up in that kind of environment.
And so now you have started to augment the training that you did receive as a child, and this sense of feeling, having a spirituality. I assume from your comments, a spirituality that starts to liberate you, as opposed to having a religiosity that causes you to have to be put in a box and be confined and secret. Talk a little bit about how you found yourself to, for example, places like Body and Brain, and the kinds of things that Ilchi Lee has been sharing in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we landed here in 1992, typical American dream. I started working at McDonald's as my first job. Uh, very, very typical story, right? And this, American dream, what is it? It's about getting the best education, right? So getting, progressing in your job, getting that house that, you wanted, that luxury cars, all the great possessions, right? So that was really what I was striving for. I felt like, when I came from really nothing, my parents were doing the best they could to support us, even though both of them had, bachelor's degree. They couldn't practice them here because my mom was librarian, right? And and my dad was a mechanical engineer, and he was working primarily with sewing equipment, which a lot of stuff, of course, was going overseas at the time. Anyway, so really kind of this burden of continuously striving and working and studying and achieving, right? All the things that I wanted to achieve. And it's never really been enough, and I remember sitting kind of where my journey with Body and Brain began, is that I felt like I've got all my degrees. I had my MBAs. I was in the leadership position at the time, felt like I had my recognition. I was married, 2 kids. And I remember sitting at H&R Block meeting and looking at our tax return, right? And looking at my husband at the time and saying, oh my God, look, we've achieved that dollar figure, right? We live in this big house in suburbia Minnesota. We're driving these luxury cars. We've traveled the world, been to luxury places, luxury hotels. And both of us, without even saying anything, there was this unhappiness. It was this sense of, things were really not working out the way we expected. We both felt like we were most unhappiest in our lives. Our marriage of almost 20 years was falling apart, and there was just, for me personally, it was just this void inside with all the things that I thought America and American dreams are going to bring for me, and when I actually achieved that, when we, looked at that dollar figure on our tax return, right? And that's kind of where my journey began. I kind of started realizing that growing up in, in Jewish family, and having my, background, having this immigrant drive, right, that a lot of us have here in US, I was just depleted. I was
Mm.
completely depleted, have all the things I've had, reaching that possession, that goal, right? And so I stumbled. It was a center here in Minnesota. It was the first center that was open, Body and Brain, and I accidentally found a flyer in, out of all places, Russian store. When I never really shop, but it happened to be there. And I walked in, and the place just opened, and I became the first member that signed up naturally. And I remember telling my Wanjanim, Master Hong, which is just been great friend of mine now, that I'm just so depleted. I'm just so depleted. I have no more energy to give. Physically at 36, I felt like I was working out and had a personal trainer, but every part of my body was hurting. And I just didn't have the energy anymore to do anything. And it felt like my life was just crumbling around me. Everything I knew, everything that made sense and was important to me was falling apart. So that's kind of my journey began.
Great. But your story is so useful to so many of our listeners and watchers, because I think that we all know that we all get seduced by the need to be successful, the seduced by things, brand name, designer this and somebody's name on that, and we think that so often that's the key, that if I get all those things, somehow whatever is missing in my soul, in my heart, will magically be cured by having these things. And you're an example of someone who had all of that, but it still wasn't enough. It wasn't what you needed.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And similar to Julia's stories, there was just this continuous question in my mind, what is that I really truly want? Is this really what I truly want? All these possessions, is that something that I'm here? Is this my purpose? Those are the questions that just came racing through my mind, because it just wasn't making me happy anymore. No matter how much, it's never enough. It was never enough. Something was still missing.
Yes. Well, you talked about some of the material things and the cars and having the chance to travel, and of course, there's nothing wrong with having those things.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, those who are, many of the people that are watching us are at a point in their life where they are at their 60s and looking to the future to live, another half of their life to 120. There's others of us who are watching this who are young and who are just building their careers. And I think we would both agree from our vantage point that nothing wrong with trying to be successful, nothing wrong with acquiring, the opportunity to live a comfortable life. But I think you're really giving us a reminder that if that's all you're doing, and if you're on the treadmill chasing after these material things, and if you think that there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow on that journey, we're here to tell you that that's not true.
It's not the case. No.
Let me switch from your sense of connectivity to things to ego. Now, one of the things that it's easy to tell about you is that you are a confident executive. You are clear who you are. I imagine that you had to struggle to have people recognize you, reward you, and I bet you at some point in your career, it was very important to be validated by others.
Yeah, absolutely. On my strive for recognition, and with this hunger of an immigrant, right? Because, when you come here, when you're absolutely nothing, right? When you have nothing to start with, right? You hunger for those things. You hunger for recognition. And also there was a sense of me that, that sense back from my childhood, like I need to try harder. I need to be better. People are watching. It's so important for me how people were perceiving me, right? And then, of course, realistically, it was not who I am. So I was turning into somebody. I woke up, remember one night, feeling like, I was this executive. I was the CFO. I was this iron lady, who never gives any money to anybody, and, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't like myself. I looked in the mirror and I was like, I don't like myself anymore. You know, I mean, I can see where people, don't like me because I don't like myself. And then I'm like, and it's not really who I am. So I started questioning, and I went on through this journey of thinking about the idea of living from your soul and living from ego. And what I've realized, that I've gone through this phase of
I'm sorry, let me interrupt you for
go
one
ahead.
second. That
Sure.
was so beautiful. Say that again. I want to make sure that we all capture that. You said leading from, say it again.
Leading from your soul versus from a place of ego.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. So one of this kind of awakening moment that I didn't really like myself anymore, the way I was, coming into the world, the way how my executive personality, and I felt like there got to be a better way. There got to be a better, authentic leader, where it's not about people not liking you or liking you, but about you liking yourself. First and foremost, you liking yourself. And so I started on this journey trying to recognize whether or not ego is good or bad, right? Like you go through spiritual journeys and all of a sudden you feel like ego is evil, right? You don't need ego, and of course what I've come to recognize and realize that it's not that ego is bad. It's just that ego is nowadays, like I said, driving us. It's motivating us. It's in the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've kind of come to learn and to realize that it's not that being ego protecting us from harm, back in prehistoric ages where we were running away from lion, the ego was telling us like, run away because you're going to die. It was important to have ego. It still is. But the ego should be kind of in the backseat. Your true nature, your soul, leading from the soul is what really is important. And coming to that point of internal power and
Yes.
balance
Yes.
that's really the place of your soul.
Ah,
Not from a place of ego, which is protection, accumulation, fear in the way. All of the things that we need to sometimes live in the world today, and something
yes.
that needs to protect us from harm, but it's certainly not what needs to be our master. It's
That's
not
great.
something that should motivate us. Yeah.
Let me get your reaction to something. There's a quote in the book that I think is very relevant to what you said, and see how this takes us a little further. And I'm going to look away from you for just a second and read this quote.
Sure.
What Ilchi says in the book is that what's hopeful is that in the second half of life, more than at any other time, it is the optimal time for finding and realizing self. What people ultimately want isn't money, cool cars, expensive clothing, or lofty titles. It's not material values like the attainment of wealth and social status. What they want is a feeling that they can live freely and independently. The feeling of loving and being loved, the feeling that their lives are precious and valuable, the feeling that they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. In short, he concludes, people want more than anything else the inner satisfaction that comes from the realization of their highest values. How does that resonate with you?
Amazing. Amazing. It's interesting. It's interesting because where did I actually find happiness? Where do I find happiness now? Now
Mm-hmm.
that I've realized that I want to, lead from the soul, I want to lead from my ego. Where do I really find happiness, right? And I realized that it's really paying forward. I really feel happy when I'm living my purpose of bringing all the knowledge, all the experience, all the leading and teachings of many, many people along my, my life, my mentors, my Wanjanims, my masters, my guides, taking that experience and bringing it to more people and explaining to them, bringing that understanding and that love that I've experienced from others, the teachings, bring it to all the people that I meet, right, essentially, and then bringing all of this to corporate America. Actually, that's what my purpose is. I feel like I should become that bridge, because I found that being my true self, being in my place of power, allows me to be the authentic leader, liking myself and the job, connecting with more people, and bringing people along with compassion and empathy versus, force and power, which a lot of times, unfortunately, we face in corporate
So
American reality out there.
I think what I'm hearing from you, and this is you're embodying a very important, I think, spiritual concept that enlightened people of many different faith traditions and spiritual quests begin to understand, and that is that uh, that instead of worrying about collecting things of the world to give you your sense of happiness and joy, it's really more about what you can share with others. And you use the words compassion and empathy, and sort of going into the environment, and in your case, in corporate America, but bringing with you your understanding of higher values and then giving those to others. Seems to me what you're saying is more rewarding in your life than a designer handbag or a brand name suit.
Yeah, absolutely. Casting that shadow, right? As a leader, we all walking every day, right? And we every day we casting shadows on many, many people that we interact with, and we do on a regular basis interact with many. So how can I bring that shadow? How can I? And it's maybe from space of our teaching of brain education, it's really not the shadow anymore. It's bringing the light. It's bringing the light back to the world, showing that there are other ways. Not to say that we can't have possessions, not to say that we can't have the cars we want, or bad or good, but certainly not something that drives us. It's not certainly something that fulfills us. Certainly not something we should be attached to and
Yeah.
value beyond our personal value to the world, our
Yes.
personal power to the world. Uh,
So, so there'll be people who are listening to us who this will resonate with, and they'll say, "Yes, that makes sense." But now, how do I begin to get in touch with myself, the real me, not the me that's shaped by the expectations of others, not the me that's being marketed to 24/7 by commercials and social media, the real me, the me that I like about me, the me that I want to be. I know in my own journey towards my own spiritual health, I've had to really spend real work on throwing out all the artificial markers and getting to authenticity. How has it been for you? What kind of things have helped you figure out just who you are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So 4 years ago, when I walked into Body and Brain, and when I really put my focus on understanding who I really am, because I certainly didn't like who I was at the time. So there must have been somebody else in me that doesn't like what they see. It was this realization that there's something inside of me didn't like who I was, which was really kind of goofy concept at the time. So I realized through brain education that apparently I have choice. Apparently I can choose to be who I am. If I don't like being that personality, then I can choose not to be and change my
Oh,
ways. But it
this is
happens through observation and
yes.
awareness.
So, a couple of great points here that come out of this last few minutes. One is the name of the Ilgili's book, which I love, is "I've Decided to Live." Choice, making decisions, and I think this is a theme that you amplify in a number of different ways, but always making a choice to try to do better and not being a victim of your circumstances. Just as your parents were not a victim of their circumstances, they made a choice to live a better life. But now you also describe that you've gone through a lot of training, and you mentioned you've gone to training in New York, you've done training in Arizona,
Yeah.
different kinds of techniques. But I think what it all boils down to, if I understand it well, is you've spent time being quiet. You've spent time just listening to yourself dispassionately, just being in a quiet, dark room and just spending time with yourself, and then learning how to use that quiet time to be in touch with yourself. Am I getting the point here?
Absolutely. I call it modern cave. Modern cave. And funny enough is that exactly the concept I bring back to my teams. When I'm going for my trainings, and usually they're 6 to 9 days, some of them a little longer, I literally tell them that this is it. It's my modern cave time. You won't be able to reach me by cell, by phone. I trust you guys. You are amazing leaders, and I know you can do well without me, but this is my time. And I choose to go in my modern cave and disconnect. And I think that's important because you're absolutely right. It's during those times when everything is just quiet, where there is, beautiful nature, where there is just time for me, going inside, learning about myself. It's exactly the time when the, revelations happen. Revelations happen about myself and the world and my purpose, everything. Just boom. We walk out like I'm a brand new person every
and
time.
and you're doing this by, for yourself and by yourself. I think what comes through this is no one can give you the value of you other than you. It's nice to have people pat you on the back. It's nice to have people say, you're such a great executive and you're a great leader and we just love you. But if you don't find it for yourself, all of that becomes as empty as cotton candy. It tastes good for a second and then it just goes away. And so I think what you're doing, which I think others need to, I think, listen and maybe take heed and use you as an exciting inspiration, is the sense of going into your modern cave. Now, not everybody can go away for 6 or 8 days. I mean, first of all, what I like about that is it really speaks to the depth of your commitment to yourself and your journey, that you're willing to unplug, turn that cell phone off, turn off that computer and that email, and just be yourself. But even if you can't do it for 6 or 8 days, I think you probably have had the experience in your life where 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night, an hour or two on the weekend. I mean, we don't all have to turn off for 6 or 8 days, do we?
Absolutely not. And of course, I've been on this journey probably for over 15 years with body and brain for the last 4. So, and trust me, 4 or 5 years ago when I was going away for 2, finding true self, basically 1.5 day training in Chicago, and leaving my kids at the time, already teenagers, away, being away from them, leaving my home, my job for 1.5 day on the weekend seemed like impossible. It was so impossible for me to turn off my phone, to walk away. But I think it's really about, to your point, making this consistent choices and choosing yourself, choosing time for yourself. It's not only making you it's bringing that internal power that you can make choice, that you are making choice, right? It's just making you so much more confident that if you can't do this, it's probably a lot of things that you can do greater than this, right? So it's really building that confidence when you're making these choices that are so hard for us to do. And trust me, being a mother, being a leader, being a wife, being the daughter and the sister and all the other obligations in the world, so hard to find time for yourself. But when you do, it becomes the best thing you've ever done to yourself, because then it transpires in every part of your life, in every way.
It reminds me, as you're talking about I take a lot of airplanes and I'm flying all the time. And every time that the in-flight attendant gives us the message that when you drop the oxygen mask,
That's right.
put the mask on yourself.
That's my favorite one. I tell it all the time.
Then you put it on someone else, because if you're not together,
Yes.
you can't help anybody else.
Yes.
One thing that I think that also comes through that many of us watching you will take from you is you don't seem to make this journey inward, this discovery of who you are, your discovery of your mission. It doesn't sound like it's work. You look like it sounds like fun.
Absolutely. Work was the other part of me that I was trying to keep, persona in a mask. That was a hard work, to put this on and be, who people should, you think, perceive you to be. This is remembering, right? This journey is that not so much of us learning anything, being through my MBAs and college and universities, I continue feeling like I need to learn something. But what I uncovered on this journey is quite the opposite. I've uncovered that it is actually remembering. It's really about natural release of all this strenuous pressures of succeeding and rewards and desires, right? And releasing and just going to a place of peace and love. And it's so much easier to do.
I love that. And I'll try this one last observation on you and see how it resonates to you. A lot of times in my life, because I was sort of also a corporate executive and used to being on the success ladder. And again, thank gosh for the success I've had. I've enjoyed my life very much.
Absolutely.
But I've learned that when I am not as focused on the work having a specific outcome, but focus on the work for its own sake, for doing good work because I want to do good work, doing the right work because it is the right work, then benefits accrue. But if I'm so focused on, I want a reward, regardless of whatever, then the work is no fun and the work isn't as good. At least that's my experience. Does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So of course, as an executive, you always under pressures of time, you always under pressures of achieving, highest, best results in the last amount of time, least amount of money, right? All hard propositions, and then mobilizing lots of people to come with you on that journey. And I agree with you. It's not that I no longer see the date and the time where I need to get stuff delivered, but it's the joy in doing it together with others. Really, to your point, the process, right, of working with people. And I spend more time now getting to know people, relate to people on maybe personal level, understanding the way they are and where they're coming from. And I think that connection becomes, not your mundane delivering a project type of stuff, but it becomes this collective joy of bringing something amazing to the finish line. And so I have so much more joy and pleasure. So I was able to kind of bring my trainings, my feeling of that joy, that peace of being one with others, yes, back to the corporate America. And now my job is not really a job. I actually enjoy what I do, and I enjoy working with people I'm working with. And I completely agree with you. It completely turned my world in corporate America upside down. My understanding of what was important.
Completely. Well, I hope that everyone who's watching, regardless of whether you're an executive or you're not an executive, whether you're doing whatever kind of work it is that you are doing to support yourself, that you are able to think about your value, your mission, and doing whatever you're doing to the best of your ability. Not even always worrying about, as I said, the outcome, but how you express yourself. It may be, as you touched on several times in this conversation, the sense of working with others. No matter what the task is, helping other people to be their best becomes the way you express your inner self, your true value, the real you, the true you, the timeless you. It's one that's saying, I'm going to be connecting with everyone and helping everyone else to achieve, no matter what it is that we're doing. And I will derive more satisfaction from that, or being kind, as you said, and empathetic and compassionate to others in the course of our work. That allows us to develop this sense of who we are as we continue to grow and nourish. And by the way, if you are rewarded with people patting you on the back, terrific, but you don't need them. What you need is you. We're going to end up, and I'm going to read you one more quote that is a quote that we often use at the end of our shows with guests, because I just like it so much, but also because I always love to hear what our guests have to say about this. And this, again, is a quote from the book. So I'm going to avert my eyes a little bit and just read this real quickly. It's about the concept of completion. And in the book, Ilchi says, I'd like to suggest completion as the value we should pursue in the second half of our lives. Completion means everything is realized, and to make complete or whole. What do you make complete? Yourself? Your life? Completion isn't about the visible world or anything external. It's about the world of consciousness, a sense that allows us to feel what is going on inside of us. It is a feeling of fulfilling our hearts, like pride, satisfaction, oneness, and peace. And finally, he says, completion is finished in the final moment of life when we breathe our last breath. A life of completion is one that allows us in the moment of death to look back on our lives, to feel satisfaction and fulfillment, and to close our eyes in peace and happiness. I have no more regrets or resentments. I've lived a life full of meaning, and I'm proud of myself. How do you react to that? Any last words from you?
It's absolutely beautiful. And from of course, brain education, I would just add one thing: take back your brain. Take back your brain. Yeah, let's all become our masters, our creators, our deliberate masters and creators of our lives, right? Let's really make it a fulfilling. Let's believe that we can. Let's trust ourselves that we can. Let's use our brain, all the resources, all the things that we have to find that meaningful purpose that can serve many others outside of just yourself. And I think it starts with really taking back your brain, taking back your brain. I think it's just so powerful. It's just we were running our life like, on this little, rat spinning around this rat race, right? Rat race, completely unconsciously, right? Unconsciously based on some early childhood conditioning and other things. When we're really in presence, we're in internal power, we're balanced, then we're going to be amazing. We're going to be creators. We're going to be empowered, passionate, loving every moment of it. So let's
Oh,
take back our brains.
and and Julia, you are all of those things and then some. Thank you for
You're too
sharing
kind.
this show with us today. We really appreciate it. And for those of you in the audience, we always are happy to hear from you. So you'll see the information on the screen that will tell you how to reach us, how to raise a question, where you can go for more information. But above all, we hope that you'll come back and walk the next leg of this journey with us. We promise to have something interesting for you and something that you will learn from as well. So thanks to you for joining us all. And Julia and everyone else, take care and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.